again, it's a pleasure to be talking to you. I kind of want to go back to, to the beginning a little bit. Now in this day and age, obviously, for all the right reasons, there's a great amount of attention on Black entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in media. What was it like for you at the beginning when you were, I almost hasten to say breaking ground, because you were breaking the ground to break ground. I'm just really curious what that experience was like for you when really, frankly, nobody was paying attention to assisting Black entrepreneurs in any way, shape, or form. So what was that like in the beginning?
I have to, remind people regarding when the idea was conceived in 1968, what was going on within the country. We had the killing of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy. We had riots at the Democratic Convention. We had what happened in Mexico City with the Olympics, John Carlos. And so there was a lot of turmoil in the country. And so there was a desire to begin to get young Blacks into business. I was a budding banker at the First National City Bank then. And there's a man that I affectionately call the Godfather of Essence. His name is Russell Goings. He had his own investment banking firm that was helped by Shearson and Hamel. Shearson was one of the largest investment banking firms in the country. And this gentleman, Russell Goings, persuaded his leaders at Shearson to try to assist and get young Blacks into business. I had met Russell before. He had tried to recruit me to become an investment banker from Citibank, but I declined his offer. But he called me and said, "Ed, I'm inviting about 25 young men to a meeting at 14 Wall Street on October 8th, 1968. I'd like you to be a part of the invitees." So I come to this meeting, 25 of us show up, and the number 2 guy at Shearson Hamel, a fellow by the name of Michael Victory, starts talking about capitalism, why there's a need for it, and how Shearson may be helpful if you got ideas about starting your own business. And my former partner raised his hand and said, and let me back up, Michael Victory said there must be a need. He was throwing out examples of possible businesses that one may want to think about. And he said, there must be a need for a magazine for Negro women. And my former partner raised his hand and said, I've had an idea for a magazine for Negro women. And Russ Goings, the gentleman who brought us all together, said, where's Ed Lewis over there? He knows something about money. Why don't you two get together at the end of the meeting? And at the end of the meeting, 2 other guys joined us. There were 4 of us. And that's how we came together in November 1968. But I think you need to have an understanding about what was going on within the country. Just a lot of turmoil, all the riots in Chicago and New York. And so that was the environment that we came into. And certainly with regard to a Black women's magazine, that was truly off the charts. I remember having, in 2005, I was having dinner with the then Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. And I said to her, I said, you and I are on the opposite end of the political spectrum. But having said that, you are the Secretary of State, a Black woman. That was mind-boggling to me because in 1970, when Essence made its debut, how Black women were thought of as uncouth, loudmouth, poor, on welfare, can't read. And here we come out with a magazine to celebrate the beauty and intelligence of Black women. And here you are, 2005, the Secretary of State and all the other credible Black women like Oprah or Halle Berry, who came forth and who were shining out there, Michelle Obama, of course. And now we have the Vice President of the United States. So it's really kind of extraordinary in terms of, I can't even get my arms around to say 53 years that the magazine has been publishing.
It must be, those experiences must be so surreal now, because I think, people talk about it like it was a fait accompli, that, oh, of course, we'll go a different direction, as we like to say at Lonely Entrepreneur, create a playground where nobody else is playing.
Yes.
But to your point, the headwinds of what had gone on in Mexico City and what was going on right in the late 1960s, which I was born in 1968.
Okay.
To be able to stake that claim. But what's interesting is in that room, when we talk about, what are the challenges of Black entrepreneurs? Access to capital, access to network. it all happened, sounds like it all happened in that room, but it must have taken, you hear the stories of some of the early Black athletes, especially in things like baseball and other sports, just experiencing things along the way. It must have been incredibly challenging, even, having the stature of capital people with you to stake that claim. What were some of the challenges you faced along the way? I'm sure there were many. Oh, I think you're on mute. Ooh, I can't.
Now, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. There were absolutely many challenges. We made many presentations on Wall Street to try to raise capital. When you talk about baseball, one of my heroes outside my family was an extraordinary man who had such impact on our lives, was Jackie Robinson.
Of course.
And I wanted to be a baseball player like Jackie Robinson. But what many people may not know, that he helped start a bank called the Freedom National Bank in New York City.
Oh, interesting.
And when I was seeking early money, I went to the bank and got the president of the bank to loan me $13,000. If he had not loaned me that $13,000, I may not be talking to you now.
Yeah.
But we put a financial package together. We wanted to raise $1,200,000. All we were able to do was raise on just $130,000. So you can severely undercapitalize. But I often wonder if I'd had the $1.5 million that I was seeking, I may not be here now. It's amazing what you can do with less.
Yep.
But so we were trying to raise capital, total disbelief about 4 Black men who wanted to start a magazine for Black women. And the first issue came out in May of 1970, where we only had 13 pages of ads.
Yep.
And then the next 2 issues, June and July, we had 5 pages each. So we were just trying to do all that we can just to survive and keep on going, and trying also to find talent. There were not many Blacks in the magazine industry, so we had to develop talent, but we were able to survive and hang in there and work awfully hard, 24 hours a day, really.
Yep, I'm sure. The stories afterwards of all the successes you have, many people forget those early days, in a dark room in a basement when you're staring at things like payroll and things like that. Then unless you've been there, it's very hard to really understand. And especially, the normal entrepreneurial challenges, much less the challenges of being a Black leader, starting a Black women's magazine, all the things. It's almost unfathomable. What was your first big break?
My first big break in terms of financial advertising.
Well, just in terms of the magazine breaking through.
Well, I remember in our first profit in 1977, we made $177,000.
Yeah.
And I went to my investment bankers and said, "Oh, Michael, this is Michael Victory, the gentleman I told you was member of my board." I said, "Listen, we made a profit of $177,000. And he looked at me, he said, "Ed, that's what you're supposed to do." So,
after 10 years, right?
After 10 years.
like an investment banker, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
But it was the challenge of being in a partnership. There were 5 of us who came together. One gentleman left very early on, and then we did not know each other. We got to try to know each other. We had all differences. I had to ask 2 of my partners to leave, one in 71, the other one in 74. And that created all kinds of issues because 2 of the partners came together later on to launch a control fight. So I had to overcome that and try to keep the company together. So there's a rich history of things that happened all during this development of the magazine, trying to find the right editor-in-chief.
Yeah.
Because remember too, when Essence made its debut in 1970, every woman's magazine, with the exception of Glamour and Cosmopolitan, the editor-in-chief were men. And we said to ourselves that if you're going to have a woman's magazine, it seems to us that the face of the magazine should be a woman. Yeah. And we ultimately were lucky enough that we're going to the first 3 editors of the magazine to find a woman to be the editor-in-chief. Ultimately, when I elevated Susan Taylor, who came to work for me in 1970 as the beauty editor and then the fashion editor, I made her the editor-in-chief in 1980. And Susan came to me and said, Ed, we need to do research in our market. And I said, the best thing that you can do, I want you to go travel the country and listen to what Black women have to say and bring it back and translate it into the magazine. As a result of her doing that, Susan was very charismatic and wonderful speaker. Many people thought that she ran the magazine and started the magazine. One of the reasons why I wrote my book, The Man from Essence, Creating a Magazine for Black Women, is that I wanted Black women to know, because of issues between Black men and Black women, I wanted Black women to know that there were 4 Black men who came together in 1968 to celebrate your beauty, your intelligence, in terms of where we are today.
That's amazing. If I could just jump in really quick, I thought that Susan Taylor definitely was the owner of Essence growing up, right? Her face was iconic.
Yes.
And, you know, I would be remiss to just not say thank you. As an African-American woman who grew up on Essence, it was the centerpiece of the coffee table everywhere I went. So it was an image. There are images that we were able to look at and say, and we want to aspire to be that, and including Susan, who I've met
Yes.
a couple of times, who is so gracious and amazing in her philanthropic work. And I think it is definitely important to understand as an African American woman, you know, there's so many different narratives out there about Black men empowering their women, and to understand that there are 4 Black men behind the origination, the genesis of Essence is so powerful. And just my quick question for you, you know, what can, you know, people who want to become the next Edward Lewis do, you know, to become a bit more innovative and to launch into that media space?
Well, I think one has to continue to determine what is it that you think you do or you see that's different than anyone else is doing, and you think you can do a better job. It's how you differentiate yourself. When I remember being at a luncheon when Essence got started, and a luncheon of industry people in the newspaper, radio, television, and the luncheon host, I was sitting next to the editor-in-chief of Glamour magazine, and he said, why is there a need for a magazine for Black women? I said, you see this woman sitting next to my right? She permitted me to come into the marketplace because the Glamours of the world were not talking about the beauty of intelligence of Black women. So we were filling a void that was not being fulfilled. And so we stepped in to try to make a difference, to solve a problem. And that's what people who start out wanting to be in business, they need to see that there may be a problem out here. And I got some ideas or suggestions on how I may overcome or do it better in terms of being an entrepreneur. I also have concluded too that you have to be a little bit crazy to be an entrepreneur in terms of wanting to take the risk, because it is a big risk and business is about taking risk. And this is not for everybody. This is not for the faint-hearted. Yep. When you decide you're going to step out and you want to do something on your own, and you need to have all the kinds of self-confidence to move forth and don't let anything stop you.
You know, it's interesting because when you think about talking about differentiator, as I said, Ed, before, we've talked before about, you know, finding a playground where nobody else is playing, and the idea is that it's not so natural, right? If it was so natural, then everybody would do it. It's not just different sprinkles on the ice cream cone, and especially compared to your question today, right? Is there's so much clutter and things move so quickly and there's so much capital, you know, how do you really find that when you say what you said, which is not the way Black women were perceived back then, and saying we're going to portray them and bring out the beauty and the brilliance of them. We talk about it now like, of course, But at the time, when you almost know that you found the playground, people go, well, that's ridiculous.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm always harking back to Clive Davis when they used to say to him, you get so many demo tapes and from so many different artists, how do you discover Whitney Houston? And he said, I tap my feet. And you're like, what do you mean? He goes, when I listen to the music, I tap my feet. And it's almost like when you hear it and you hear him describe it back in 1968, everybody's doing this. Nobody's paying attention to Black women. And to the extent they are, they have these negative perceptions.
Yes.
You hear that and you go, yeah, right? You tap your feet, but then you walk into the investment banker and you walk into all the channels that are used to doing it a different way and doing it. And like you said, that's where all of the things you're talking about, like the not being faint of heart, the ability to have that balance of, ego. You have to have ego to tell the world that they should be celebrating Black women in 1968. I mean,
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
you have to, because I'm sure every white and other investment banker would say that's absolutely ridiculous. And as you know, Ed, we said that my rewards business in healthcare, they're like, we're never going to reward people to be healthy. We'll never do that.
Yes.
But also that, and obviously it shines through today, that humility to understand there's so much to learn. There's other people that you have to bring along the way. Like you said, it's not for the faint of heart.
One of the things I am most proud of, for example, in terms of what Essence has been able to do something that I wanted, how I would celebrate the 25th anniversary of Essence. I was having drinks in New Orleans with the then, my God, George Wein, the legendary jazz performer, as well as the founder of the New Orleans Jazz. And he and I were having drinks. This is 1994. And I was telling him, I was trying to think of a way to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Essence in 1995, something just a little bit different. He said to me, Ed, you ever thought about doing a music festival in New Orleans at the Superdome or the 4th of July weekend? I said, no, but I thought about it. I know there's extraordinary synergy with regard to music, Blacks, New Orleans. And I asked George to come to my office and make a presentation to my senior team. They were lukewarm, reluctant, and didn't want to do it, but I decided to do it in 1995. And here we are, after 26 years, the festival did not go on because of the pandemic, but it's been an extraordinary, successful event in terms of setting a record with regard to the number of people who come to New Orleans over the 4th of July weekend. I was telling people in the early years, nobody comes to New Orleans over the 4th of July weekend.
Yeah.
And we gave the reason in terms of how Essence made Black women feel confident, know that we were going to try to do our best. And so it brings me just great pleasure to know that I was able to create a music festival that has had such impact. I remember at the Windsor Court in New Orleans, I was having breakfast in 2007, and I saw a Black woman looking at me and at breakfast, and she finally came up to me and she said, "Are you Ed Lewis?" I said, "Yes, I am." She said, "I'm from Mobile, Alabama. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for creating Essence. You have no idea what impact that has had on me of my lives. It sent chills up and down my spine to know that I may have been able to bring something into the world that has touched so many people in many different ways."
Well, I think that, that in and of itself is a life accomplishment that so many people aspire to. I mean, it's one thing to, have something that people digest and enjoy, and it's another thing to actually inspire them, starting at, like you said, in the early 1970s. But the other is just from a business perspective, brand. How many brands last and transcend and stand for those same values, especially in the last 5 or 10 years with all the clutter.
Yes.
If you walk down the street and you say Essence to someone, black, white, green, or blue, they all know, and you can count on one hand the number of brands. And don't get me wrong, there's brands that spend $1 trillion in advertising that do it, but the brands that did it from the experience of you as a young lady
Yes.
have it is I mean, the
Yeah.
number of brands that have done that, you can count on one hand, you know?
Yeah, when I go to the salon or if I'm at my mother's house, whoever has the print book, it's the first book that I pick up still. So, because the images are so magnificent. And I don't think there's any other publication that shows Black women at the height of beauty and intelligence and sophistication and entertainment, all things Black women more than essence. And so much where I'm like, I remember being at the nail salon and like wanting to cut the pages out the magazine. I know it's not my magazine, but I'm taking my phone and I'm snapping, the information, like, Black business owners and Black women business owners in a specific sector. I just remember. But highlighting those individuals who aren't necessarily highlighted every day.
Yes.
We have social media now. We have, the content that you have in that print book online. Well, it's translated very well. I'm an 80s baby, so being able to pick up that book,
Yes.
and
Yes.
be able to feel the pages and feel that gloss and sheen. It's just a part of your history. It's a part of who you are, and again, who you want to be and aspire to be. So thank you again. Yep.
Ed, I mean, we're talking through this, and it is almost surreal that's a fair that has happened over the course of such a long period of time, and how many brands started something, inspire and continue to inspire, and has stayed with people forever. You could never see another Essence magazine and it would stay, and that is almost unheard of. And in looking back at the journey, what was the loneliest day and what was the happiest day?
Oh, the loneliest day was April 15th, 1977, when I was served with papers by my former partners in the law firm of Proskauer, who said
Sure.
to me, "We're going to take over control of the company." I didn't know what hit me. I went down looking for my then partner. He was not in his office to tell him what had happened. And so what happened over that weekend to fight against this attempt to take over the magazine was truly an extraordinary event for me in terms of how we had to overcome that and succeed. And but we were able to do that. The magazine was not profitable from 77 to 79 because we were in a control fight. But after 1980, after we won that, the only time Essence was not profitable during my reign of leadership was in 1984 because we went into several other business opportunities. We started Essence television show. We went into license the name of Essence, so eyewear and lingerie. And we certainly we were fighting lawsuits and people who wanted to use the name Essence directed at Black women. So we had a lot of things going on in 1984, but we remained profitable all during those years. And I think the highlight for me is two things. It's two-pronged. In 2000, I was able to approach Time Inc. then with the possibilities of working together because I was interested in a magazine, a very successful magazine called Vibe. I thought it would be a very wonderful complement to Essence. And I knew that Time Inc. had started Vibe, and then they sold it, but now they were in the process of buying it again. And in having my conversations with Time Inc., I got them to persuade them to want to become a 49% investor in Essence, and we retained 51%. And then we had a 5-year window in which we would determine what next steps would be in terms of how the relationship would continue to be. And lucky for me, they approached me in 2004 about wanting to buy the remaining 51%. And we reached the deal, and I sold the magazine to Time Warner in 2005. I got a lot of criticism about that in regards to my decision. But one of the things I've often said too is that we live in a capitalist society, and I'm living the American dream helping bring a minority company into the world, and helping to sell it to a majority company.
Yeah.
And that's the essence of, for me, for example, of being in capitalism. And I often said too that the reason why Timing bought Essence was to keep the voice, not to change the magazine, but make sure that they continue to highlight the role of Black women. And so I think those two are the lowest and highest point for me.
Wow.
Was to have that, to see that happen under my watch.
And probably your old investment banking days helped you a little bit along those pathways, right?
Oh, yes, indeed. When I went to work for First National City Bank, they had me go through the executive training program. And they had professors come in from Harvard, teachers about corporate law, accounting from the Columbia Business School. And then working my way through First National City Bank, we found out about a division at the bank called financial engineering. And all the business school graduates from Harvard or Wharton or Chicago or Stanford all went into this division. There were no Blacks in that division. And so two of my other colleagues and I, we said we would like to be there. We went to see the senior people and asked that we also get an opportunity to be in this division. And they selected one of my colleagues first, and they selected me. And I went into this division. It's called financial engineering. Fancy name for financial analysis.
Yeah.
And by being in that division, I said, "Oh my God, what did I get myself into?" When I saw how my colleagues worked from 6, 7 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, doing financial ratios in major companies all across the country, the one thing I learned more than anything else, the importance of cash. Cash is king, queen, jack, and everything else.
Yep.
And when people ask me, but when I sold the magazine, they said, "Ed, did you accept cash, accept stock?" I said, no. It was a cash deal. But that was very helpful in understanding the importance of what cash could do for you with regard to how you run your business.
Well, and I think I might have shared with you, I started my career as a mergers and acquisitions lawyer at a large New York law firm. So I had some of the benefit of that. But one of the things I think as we wrap up here, and again, I can't thank you enough, you think about the entrepreneurs will often say, well, as long as I have passion and vision, right? And then others will say, well, there's all this functional stuff like the stuff we're talking about here, right? That I've got to hire people. And what you realize, it's all of it, right?
Yes,
It's to fair, you've heard us say before, it's like a mom that has their first child and they wake up the next day and they don't say, "I'm great at this mom thing."
Exactly.
I would not have achieved success that I was able to do if I did not help an extraordinary number of people. I always thank my staff, my former partners who were there in the beginning. We're no longer with each other now, but it was a number of people who helped me be where I am today. And I can never forget that in terms of what it took to come forth with this journey and be able to hang in there and succeed.
So last final question. Obviously, the context from 1968 to now has changed for the Black entrepreneur. Obviously, in some ways, we still face incredible challenges.
Yes.
And in some ways, the society is starting to understand and try to make some strides. What advice would you give to a young Black man or woman that is thinking about taking on the entrepreneurial venture in the year 2021?
Go for it. But more importantly, regrettably, the extraordinary killing of George Floyd has seemed to open up an incredible opportunity in which I thought I would never see so much emphasis on the lives of Black individuals all across the country, all across the world, and people stepping up to want to try to finally understand and do something in this market. And so I would say to young women and young Black men, access to capital is a little bit better, still tough. You still got to do your homework. You still need to understand that you're fulfilling some kind of a void. It is 24/7. And you have to be willing to take the risk. You've got to be able to hire people better than you and listen to what they have to say and stay out of their way, and try to know that and be supportive of them and let them do their job in terms of wanting to make sure that your business is going to thrive. It's, as I said earlier, business is not for everybody. But, and I also recall through my family, my uncles, that during the Depression, businesses were starting. So even though we've had a very difficult time during this COVID-19, the opportunities are there, and don't be afraid, and go to try to make a difference in terms of helping people get employed and make a difference overall to our society, and helping the well-being of our country.
Well, Ed, I know that I've had the chance to speak with you a little bit, and you know what we've been trying to do with the Black Entrepreneur Initiative to try to empower 100,000 Black men and women to try to make those impacts. But I can't thank you enough, myself, on behalf of our team, for being involved in this initiative with us. It's obviously, we get to see these Black men and women every single day, you know, making strides. So I wanted to, on behalf of everybody at the Lonely Entrepreneur, really thank you for that.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
It's our pleasure. Well, thank you again for your precious time. We really appreciate it. It's truly an honor and a privilege. There's so much, I think, vision and understanding that people can get when you have something that, you know, everybody always says when after it works, right? It's the fact. And to have people understand from where you came and the headwinds that you faced and what was going on in society 10 years later, just like co-founder battles all the time, 10 years later, right when you're about to turn profitability, now deal with, you know, people in the team fighting to break up the business with big boys and girls lawyers involved. Which is so,
yes. Oh, yes.
You know, I think sometimes people feel they see your picture and it's deservedly iconic, but they don't understand the sausage making that goes. They're like, oh, it was easy, and obviously nobody thought it was easy, but it truly is an inspiration. And I think when people look back and say, what was it like then? I know what it's like now, but what was it like then to do it and see it result in not only just wild success and an acquisition, but frankly, a brand that stands with very few others. It's a privilege to have this conversation with you.
My pleasure.
Terrific.
Thank
you very much for your time. Thank you, Tafir, for being here, and we really appreciate it. Have a
Great
terrific
meeting you.
day.
Yeah. All right.